to Latinx Can, a podcast showcasing Latinx professionals who turn their dreams into realities. I'm your host, La Doctora Jenire Flores Delgado, and today I'm here with Mr. Wilmer Chavarria, a school principal whose commitment to education propelled him from his very humble beginnings. And he is here to tell you, sí se puede, my friends, sí se puede. This is the second part of this episode in which we will learn about how Wilmer became a teacher. If you have not listened to the first part, please do so. It will help you understand where his passion for education comes from. In this second part, we will learn about how his hard work and multicultural experience led him to be one of the 2 top-graded teachers in the state of New Mexico, and about the things that motivated him to become a school principal. More importantly, Wilmer encourages us to advocate for our children's education and to hold teachers and administrators accountable to deliver it. However, don't forget to be kind to yourself and others, because we are all in this together. Before you're about to graduate from college, you were awarded the prestigious Doesnt Fellowship. Can you tell us more what it is and what it allowed you to do?
Graduating seniors from select colleges in the United States have the opportunity to apply for a fellowship called the Doesnt Fellowship, which it's a fellowship, it's a grant that allows you to travel the world for 1 year to places where you've never been to. So one condition for winning the grant or for being awarded the grant or the fellowship is that you do not return to the United States, to your home country, or to any place you've been to. So I couldn't go to Canada, I couldn't go to Palestine, I couldn't go to most places in Central America. I couldn't go to places I had been to before. Because the point was that you explore the unknown, places you've never been to. And the second condition is that you spend all the money. And back then they gave you like about $30,000 to go. Now it's more money probably. And so it was really neat. And I think the logic behind that model was because the father of the Watson family, they said that everything he knew and everything he learned, or the biggest strengths that he had, came from going out into the world and exploring the unknown and being faced with uncomfortable situations and new challenges that he didn't foresee. And so they wanted to give that opportunity to people with promise, or young people that showed quote unquote qualities, the same qualities. Not that I'm going to be the next Watson to invent the IBM or to take us to the moon, but at least I managed to persuade them that they wouldn't be wasting their money on me. I said, I'm gonna take advantage of this, and I'm just gonna go and do this, do that, and all that. In practice, it's not the same, but you try. And so the biggest thing at first is just winning it, because it's such a big deal in those colleges, because you can't even apply directly to it. Your college has to nominate you. So my college first had to nominate. They nominated 3 people out of the whole college. They nominated 3 students, and I was one of the 3. So just winning the nomination, I was like, wow, that's amazing. Makes me feel great. Even if I don't get the fellowship, I remember thinking I was nominated. I was only 3 people out of the whole school that were nominated. Something that since I came to the school 4 years before, everybody was talking about. Everybody was thinking of applying. And I remember feeling so lucky and so privileged and so happy to have won the nomination. And so when I won the actual fellowship, I was just over the moon. I was like, wow, I'm the coolest kind of thing. Inside, outside, I was trying to play it cool outside. So and then after that, it was just a very, very nice year. a lot of doing nothing, just enjoying being in a place and just taking it all in and looking for things to do related to your passion. And in my situation, it was mostly trying to go to places where they were doing independent filmmaking or people making movies, going to film festivals. In some places, I was teaching filmmaking to local journalists and filmmakers,
Wow.
or collaborating with artists and media professionals. And so it was a little bit of everything that year, and it didn't look the same in every country I went to.
What countries did you go to?
So I went to Costa Rica, Bolivia, the Netherlands, England, and Rome. Those were the countries.
I bet you didn't think that you were going to visit all those places.
Did I just say Rome for country? Sorry.
And I didn't catch it either, so that's okay, you know.
When I was in Italy, that was the only place I stayed the whole time. So when I think I went, I don't think Italy, I think Rome.
Yeah. Well, you learn a little bit of geography going around those places anyway, so
I knew I was in Italy. Like, of course I know it.
That's such a nice opportunity to have the time and the money to sit down and explore your passion and really try to understand what is it that you want to do with your life, you know, or at least try to think about it. But you know, you were exploring film and cinematography during this year, and then you ended up being a teacher. There seems to be like a disconnect there. So tell us a little bit about how you merged those two.
Well, while I was studying in the United States, I knew already that I wasn't going to be working in cinematography. I mean, it was all connected, but I would say that my decision was made in my freshman year.
Oh, wow.
No, I would say the first semester of my sophomore year, almost my freshman year. Here's why. I already felt like I was pretty good at editing. I already knew that I didn't need classes for that. I needed expensive equipment, which you don't have unless you have like $100,000. But other than that, with just, the regular equipment that you can access at the school and all that, you can do little things here and there, but just for fun or just for class assignments. But I already knew that I knew how to do all that. I only needed the funding if I ever wanted to make a movie and all that. But I didn't need the knowledge. So I went to New York City on my sophomore year of college, and I spent 4 months or so, a semester there, in something called the New York Arts Program. And it was fully funded by the Davis Scholarship. So I took a semester. Yeah, I took a semester off from Earlham, just went to New York City, and it was a program that was endorsed by Earlham College. So I still got my 18 credits, and it was last semester of schooling. But in New York City, at the heart of New York City, in Chelsea, in Manhattan. And I was working for 2 film companies there, one called Rumor Films and one called Epoch Films. Rumor Films actually had won all sorts of awards in Sundance Festival and all kinds of things. So they had a name for themselves because they had made this famous film about George W. Bush. And so they were a little famous, and I didn't even know it when I went to work for them. And then I got also a position, an internship position at Epoch Films, and they were making things for Apple, for Microsoft, corporate things. All these things were really high-level multimedia film things that I was just thrown into.
Right.
And as I told you, I was already pretty good and pretty up-to-date with industry standards in terms of editing. And the places I was doing internships with really quickly knew that. They saw that, and then they gave me very strong responsibilities to edit things that were, high stakes and that were very expensive, etc. And then I was glad that I had that semester, because by the end I felt like I had already had a taste of what the industry is like, and I had already done work that was pretty advanced, and I did not love it. I didn't like it. I was like, okay, if I need a job, sure, I can get a job doing this because I'm pretty good at it. And I already know where to get a job. In fact, I just had it for this whole semester. But am I having fun? No, I'm not, because I'm not making my own thing. I'm just making someone else's vision happen. I'm just getting paid to edit a KitKat video, which I'm not interested in. Like, it's just not fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not telling the stories I want to tell. I'm not working with the people I want to work with. I'm not
Right.
back in my community creating art, which is what I love doing.
Yeah.
And so that type of work is not the type of work I wanted to do. And so I continued my education in cinematography, but I knew that once I graduated, I was not going to go into cinematography. I knew that I was going to make films in my life, planning to. I still plan to do that. I keep writing often. I have like a collection of stories and scripts that I've been writing over the years to become movies. I am planning to make those movies happen, but not as my job. I don't want that to be my job. I want that to be the time in which I have fun, in which I collaborate with people that I love, time that I create projects that we all are invested in, that they are not our jobs, but instead that they literally are our passion, and that we're doing it because we love it, not because we need a paycheck. And I never, ever applied to a job like that, because I knew intentionally I didn't go back to New York City or to LA or to California. I didn't do that. Instead, I came back to the United States after the Watson and waited for some time because I couldn't study or work because I wasn't a resident yet, a few months to do that. And so I was just here doing nothing. And as soon as I get my residence, so I get permission to work, there's a job opening at the local high school. And I'm like, I guess I'm going to give it a shot, because that is something that I think I would love, but also it's a job, and it can give me a paycheck as well. And I'm not an idiot. I know things. I can be a teacher. Good one. I was very self-confident. I really was confident about my abilities, and I thought I would be a good teacher. And I did my best. I tried really hard. I went into the classroom, and it was an immediate love at first sight. Loved hanging out with the students and seeing them grow over the years. I was a high school teacher for, I don't know, a few years. But then pretty quickly I learned that education has a lot of gaps in that. I think I care enough to try and be instrumental in that as well. And that's why I ultimately decided to go into leadership afterwards.
Right. What were the classes that you taught when you first became a teacher?
Well, the opening there was for Spanish. I was like, oh, I probably don't need anything to teach Spanish. I know how to teach Spanish, right? So I applied for a license. This was in New Mexico. I applied for a license, for a teaching license in Spanish. And I think I told you this story when they sent me the application back, and they said, sorry, you don't qualify to teach Spanish. I was like, what do you mean I don't qualify? And they're like, no, you don't.
You're like, I speak Spanish.
Yeah. And they're like, well, in your transcripts, there's nothing that shows that you speak Spanish, or nothing that shows that you've taken classes to learn Spanish. But then the funny thing was that they denied my Spanish license, and they gave me instead an English license. It's the license you give to people that, that have spoken English all their lives. Literature in English, basically. And I'm like, that's funny. So you don't let me teach Spanish, but you're going to go let me teach literature to kids who have spoken English all their lives. First language is English. And you're going to make me an English teacher, like an English language arts teacher. And so basically I was the only person with an accent in that whole English department out of like 9 teachers, the only brown person in there. So I felt really out of place, but I was like, oh, well, they trust me to do this. I'll do it. I'll teach them literature, and I'll do that. So that was funny.
I like this story a lot when you told me about it as well the first time, because I was telling you, it's one of those things in which, first of all, how to make decisions about who can teach something and who cannot is not very logical or intuitive, right? It's like you probably were definitely qualified to teach Spanish. Just because they didn't see it on your transcript, it doesn't mean that you're not qualified to do so. And they never for a minute stopped to think about the fact that even though you took all your classes in English, that was your second language, right? You still had one language that was already stronger than the one that you got trained on. But then what I really like about it is when you told me how, in terms of performance as a teacher, you were always graded better than your colleagues. even though you had an accent and even though that you had not spoken English. Tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, no, so every state in the United States nowadays has a system to rate their teachers, and every state has different scales. But in New Mexico, like many other states, you can rate a teacher year to year from either minimally effective or ineffective to highly effective, or even more rare, exemplary. So if a teacher is rated exemplary, that's the highest possible rating that you could get in New Mexico at that time, right? And the little brown teacher with an accent who felt out of place in the English department, I was the only one who was rated exemplary for 2 years in a row in that whole department. Not only in that department, in that whole school, out of all departments. And then not only in that whole school, out of all secondary schools in that district.
Wow.
And I think that out of 13 schools, only 2 people that year got rated exemplary. 1 teacher in the elementary grades out of 13 schools, and then myself for the secondary schools.
Wow.
And so that, I'm not saying that alone proves anything, but it's just funny because by the measures of the state, the teacher that was receiving the highest ratings and seeing the highest student achievement in English language arts was the one who didn't speak English as a first language.
Right. But that probably draws so much from your experience, right? From the life experience that you lived up to that point, not just because you were passionate about what you wanted to teach and about teaching, but also because you had exposure to so many different cultures, languages, and art forms as well, right? Like each culture sort of feeds the art in that region, and many people, especially if you've never left the United States, you wouldn't have an idea of what that actually feels. And so it speaks for the value again that immigrants bring to this country, and is the exposure to that diversity, and not just the exposure, but being very intentional about including that diversity and taking advantage of it, because you can be just exposed to it, but if you're not intentional about including it into your personal life and bringing it into who you are, then you might as well not do it.
Right. Also, in addition to a lot of perspectives that we bring that break that monotony of a life that sadly most people have, not by choice, but that's the way it was. Well, sometimes by choice, but
yeah.
But immigrants also, we know what a challenge is. We've been there, done that.
Yeah.
And so we don't give up very easily. And so we are resourceful, we are creative, we lose sleep over being perfectionists because we have to prove ourselves much more than almost everybody else. We have to be 2 times, 3 times as good to achieve the same thing. And so we know what hard work looks like. And so, for example, if I were to try and justify or think about reasons why maybe I was the only one among that whole cohort of teachers getting the exemplary rating from the state, a lot of things came into play there. But a lot of that was also, as you were saying, framing this as the experience of an immigrant who has to prove himself a lot, non-immigrant person. That has a lot to do with it too. Yeah. Feeling like you are being judged because you're already brown, because you already have an accent, so therefore you must not be as smart as the other 8 teachers who are white and speak English as a first language.
Yeah.
So knowing that you have to prove yourself really propels you forward. And that's sometimes, it's sad that we have to be put in that situation, but sometimes it's not a bad thing because it takes you places. And I think that I'm not saying that we should then challenge everybody else to go through the same barriers. We should take barriers away from our community. But if the barriers are there, then we can face them with grace and we can push forward and prove ourselves and understand that also we are privileged for being able to prove ourselves, because not every member of our community is able to do that. But at least we're going to prove ourselves, because then that opens way to other members of our community as well to be respected and to be considered, to be capable.
Absolutely. I love that. And so you mentioned a little earlier that, you decided to be a teacher, but then you realized that there were many gaps in the educational system that you felt like you could fill by stepping into leadership. And most recently, you also took advantage of the weird situation in which we are right now, thanks to the COVID-19 virus, in which we're all forced to be indoors and forced to be working remotely. And you, instead of using or seeing that as an obstacle, you use it as an opportunity to continue your education and just seeking opportunities to be an even better school principal and leader in education. So most recently, you decided to enroll into a master's degree at Harvard University to pursue a master's in education policy and management. So tell us a little more about that decision and how that came to fruition.
Yeah, so this would be my fourth year as a principal. My first year was as a practicing principal, and it was very nice because I got to do work at all levels, from elementary to secondary to high school to district level. And then this would be my third year of specifically being in charge alone of a school. Mm-hmm. And I have been enjoying that tremendously. And by enjoying, I mean losing sleep and being frustrated and just worrying, stressing, stomach aches, and all kinds of things, but loving every minute of it. Because as you were saying at the beginning, being a teacher is a very powerful position. Mm-hmm. You can do a lot as a teacher. You have literally the future of your community in front of you, and mm-hmm. you're able to mold that. Mm-hmm. And a teacher has a lot of power. And I would not say that a principal has more power than a teacher or vice versa. They're just two different arenas, and there are different types of influences that you can have. Mm-hmm. And while I appreciated everything I did as a teacher, I felt like my calling was on the administration and leadership arena. Mm-hmm. I felt like I wanted to influence more system level decisions. I wanted to go more into policy and decision making at a higher level or at a different level. And that's what I began to pursue. So I went for a master's in educational leadership. I finished that, and I thought I was never going back to school because I was done with it. But then now I got a new job now in Vermont for a school here, which I love. This was the end of my first week there, and it was nice to have the kids for the past few days, and they're being amazing, by the way. Just this tangent, I've been so impressed at how adults have a real hard time adapting mm-hmm. to all the new guidelines and the new things that we have to do differently. Kids, you're like, okay, kids, do this, do that. No complaining, no nothing, just done. Kids are amazing. They will really, if you treat them well, if you treat them with respect and love,
right,
they'll do anything for you. Mm-hmm. And they will do what needs to be done. They are the most resilient human beings out there. We have a lot to learn from our children. We really
Absolutely.
do. But anyway, so I was beginning my job here over the summer, and then I realized that something I had wanted to do since a while ago, but that I couldn't do because that would have required to quit my job. And I didn't want to quit my job because I loved my job, was this program at Harvard. And these other masters at Harvard. And I hadn't even thought about it for a long time, because I was like, the only way to go to Harvard is if I quit my job. And I'm not in a position to do that. I don't want it because I love what I do. It's not practical because of all of my responsibilities. It's not even financially responsible because I have financial responsibilities that I can't just say, I'm going to stop working, not get any income. Right. I have responsibilities that I have to fulfill, including taking care of my mother, taking care of some things in my family. I sponsor the education of some of my nephews and nieces because I want them to advance in life the same way I did. So I try and help them financially to go to college and among other things. And so those things prevented me from just quitting my job and going to Harvard. Mm-hmm. But now COVID-19 happened. And as you said, as you very nicely put it, rather than considering an obstacle, which it is, try to make it an opportunity. And so Harvard would have never accepted somebody who said, no, I'm going to keep my job and then do your program as well. They want you to quit everything and just do Harvard. But then since
Not very realistic, right?
Now they're realistic, and they realize that a lot of this program is going to happen in a hybrid way, at least for the next year or so. And I chose to do it over 2 years. So I'm going to be doing it 2 years. I don't know what next year is going to look like. Likely I'm going to have to go in person, and I actually have to be in Cambridge and go to classes at Harvard, at the actual building. But for now, I could justify doing it that way and say, I'm going to do part-time my job, so I don't have to quit my job as a principal. And the part-time Harvard, I'm going to do it. And that is something that they designed that way. And so I was like, okay, so it sounds like Harvard is making this happen. Then I'm going to go for it. And I went for it, and I was very happy to be accepted, because sometimes people don't get accepted to Harvard programs. And so a lot of people were, it's like I've done so much in my life, as we've already been talking about, and so many things I feel proud of. But just because the name Harvard was attached to this, then all of a sudden people were congratulating me.
I'm
like, you were not congratulating me when I won the Watson, when I did this, when I did that. I'm like, it's really funny how people think about these things.
Right.
The way that a name of a university has, it's very funny. And it's not because it's any better than the other amazing universities out there. I don't think it's better than Erlam or better than the University of Florida. It's just that the name. It's just a history of the name. It's weird how that works. Yeah.
It is one of those things, again, it's like you can go to Yale and you can go to Harvard, but if you don't take advantage of the opportunity and if you don't put in the hard work, eventually, hopefully, people are going to realize that you're a phony, that you didn't really actually learn what you needed to learn in those places. Really, for me, it's not about going to school, but putting in the hard work and having the discipline to actually get through it, right?
Yeah. And I don't think, and at the end of the day, if you know what you want and you want to go for it and you have a specific goal in mind, the institution really doesn't matter. I mean, I've already gotten a taste of classes at Harvard, and I've already been engaged in, classes and discussions and projects, assignments and all that. And I can still say no class has been harder than my chemistry class or my anthropology class at Pearson at United College, which was high school. And I'm at a master's program in Harvard, and I still think that's easy compared to the IB.
I know.
So give me a break. It's really all perspective, right?
Yeah. It really is. One of the things I remember when I went to Swaziland, now it's called the Kingdom of Eswatini, it's like my first day when I arrived there, there was a power outage. And we were located in the mountain 20 minutes away from the main road, and we were isolated up there. So if there was a power outage, there was no communications. There was no phone, there was no internet, nothing for a week. My parents in Venezuela hadn't heard of me arriving to the school. It had been a week. They didn't know whether I had made it or not. And I was trying desperately to communicate with my parents, and they wouldn't know anything about me. And it wasn't until a week later that my dad called, but he didn't have a phone number to call. So he called the main school building, the phone number for the school that he found on the internet. And it just happened that there was a teacher in the main office. He went to UWC at Pearson, by the way. And his name is Mike Watson. And he picked up a phone and he said, "Oh, hello." And my dad is like, "Hello? Do you know Jenny?" "Jenny? Who is Jenny?" "Jenny is the girl from Venezuela. Please take care of my daughter." That's all he said. And then, 10 minutes later, the teacher comes to the hostel and he's like, "You're Jenny? I just got a call from your dad. He said I should take care of you. And so we're going to do this." And that was my life in Swaziland was like that. We would have power outages. We didn't have internet in our hostel. I didn't have a laptop, so I had to wait until I went to the computer center in the morning so that I would do my work and send emails. So when I went to Florida and we had electricity and we had, cell phones and I had my own laptop, I was like, what? This is amazing. I would spend 15 days without talking to my parents. And now you're telling me I can call them every day. Oh, this is a piece of cake.
Yeah. I don't think that when you get out of UWC and you go into like the regular, not even regular, but to us, they're like the real world, real schools. You're like, what are these people complaining about?
Yes.
Why are they scared of these classes? That they're nothing compared to like what we've gone through. I never felt such a sense of relief to finish something than when we finished the IB, when we took those exams and we felt so free.
Yeah.
I still have not felt that in any other program in university. I'm not saying that it's been so easy either, but it hasn't been as hard as some of that. Yeah,
absolutely.
It's all perspective. Yeah.
Yes. If you can make the IB happen while you were away from home for 2 years and also learning in a different language than your mother tongue, everything else after that, you can make it work.
It's a cake.
Piece of cake. And so one of the things that have happened thanks to the pandemic is that our lives have been upended and we've been thrown upside down. And one of the things that have been disrupted more than anything else is the education system. We had to close schools and send kids home, and parents were forced to become teachers, in an opening and closing of the eyes. And they're still sort of forced to do that. And unfortunately, there are many parents out there who cannot afford to stay home to teach their kids because they have to bring bread to their table, or parents whom simply, don't really know what tools they can use to help their kids learn at home. What is your advice for the parents and the families who are affected by this situation, and how can we make this situation still enjoyable and something that kids can learn from and us as adults can also learn from?
The advice that I would give parents, first of all, is really be gracious with yourself and your own students, because you're going through a lot and your children are going through a lot as well. Even if they don't show it, sometimes they might look like they're enjoying it, but it is traumatic for everybody, especially for children, even if they don't know it. And then be gracious with teachers and schools that are also trying to do their best, or at least I hope that they are, because my experience, my own school and the teachers I've worked with in last year when the pandemic began, last semester, and then now, they're all trying to do their best with the situation. But I do see also a lot of not recognizing the challenges that the other group is going through. I see that oftentimes teachers, school superintendents, principals do not recognize the fact that parents and families are going through a lot, and that all of a sudden not having the support from schools adds to that challenge. And so schools also need to listen and to be understanding of how these challenges manifest depending on the family and their unique situation. And families also have to be ready to engage with communicating with their own schools. Sometimes schools don't do the best for the students only because they haven't heard from you. They haven't heard from your parents. They haven't heard from the families. They think that families are okay with something, even if it's a bad idea, simply because the families did not go. And this is specifically truer with Latino families and Latin American families or immigrant families, because we think that we are not allowed, or we should feel bad to go to the school and ask for accountability, to go to the school and ask the principal, what are you doing for my child? Or go to the teachers and say, is my child receiving the absolute best education? And I'm telling you, as someone who for 2-3 years, I was the principal of schools that were majority Hispanic or with a large Latino and immigrant population. At this specific school that I was doing last semester when the pandemic hit, I had about 400 students.
Mm-hmm.
That means hundreds of families represented in a single building.
Right.
And they were the majority Latinos. I wouldn't say never, but rarely would have families come to a meeting and say, we want to be engaged. We want to ask what is happening to my child's education. What is the school doing to make sure that my child is being taken care of? When COVID happened, families didn't contact me. It's like they didn't feel like they had a voice at the time, right? And that was amazing to me. It was like families were simply accepting whatever came their way, even if it was bad. It's like families thought they should be grateful to even be able to enroll their students in our school. I'm like, what is going on? And that is sad, because if nothing, I have made it very obvious, and I've gone above and beyond to try and engage families and let them know, speak in their language, obviously, because that's my language.
Right.
And invite them, and in very specific ways make the school inviting to families who speak Spanish, to families who are immigrants. And I still felt like there was a fear, or I don't know if it was fear or what it was, that families, I got the sense, just felt like, as a parent, I should be grateful that my kid is even let through those doors, that America or the United States is letting my child receive an education. No. Your child is entitled to that education. It is not out of the kindness of anybody's heart. It is in the United States Constitution. It has been through the Supreme Court over and over and over. And your child has the right not only to be through the gates of that school, but to receive equal and quality education. So you shouldn't be thinking that you don't have the right to go and demand the best education for your child, that you should be grateful. I get the sense that a lot of families feel like that. You should consider yourself equal to any other family, and ensure that all the money that the government and the states are supposed to be spending on your child is actually reaching your child. And so I'm sorry that I became a little political, but I was just thinking about that.
No, I love it. I really appreciate that perspective. You know, some people might say, and I say some people, and the way that I'm paraphrasing this is because most recently there has been a podcast from Serial. Serial Productions is a company by the New York. Oh my gosh, it's a company by the New York Times, but it's called Nice White Parents, and it's the effect. It talks about the education system in the United States, but more specifically one school in Brooklyn. And the way that the reporter phrases it is that the reason why education has stalled and is so unequal in the United States is not necessarily because of policies, but because of white parents, because they are not afraid to advocate for their children, and they are not afraid to come into a space that might be, I don't know, more than 50% brown and black, but they come in and they feel entitled. And so what happens is that their kids get what they need, and the needs of the other kids get pushed aside. So the perspective there from some of the people that they interview is that perhaps, Latino and Hispanic families, because they are in a lower socioeconomic bracket in the society here in the United States, maybe they don't have time to go to school, to a parent-teacher conference, or, they don't have time to leave their jobs to just come and talk about what's happening at school. And so I like the perspective that you bring, in which, okay, maybe that is happening, that could be happening, but also understand that this is a right that your child has, and you have the power, and you should keep people accountable to give the best education your child can have.
Right. And coming from that as well, right now is a perfect example of that, because almost every district and every school is approaching this COVID-19 situation differently. And so much of schooling is being reinvented, and you as a parent and your children are the subjects in this experiment. And so you have a lot to lose in all kinds of aspects, because we are taking a lot of risks. So depending on your opinion on how things should be done, no matter what your opinion is, that should be heard by the school, and that should be heard by the district that serves your school. I'm not going to tell you to opine or to argue one way or another, but I'm going to tell you, you not only have a right, but a duty as a person in the United States to advocate for your child and others. And so get involved, take the time to do that. I know that it's hard on top of other things, but this is for your child. And sometimes investing a little bit of time and effort in being involved with schools might actually save you time down the line and save you resources down the line, because then you will ensure that the interests of your child are taken care of, so you don't have to take the load on your shoulders alone. And this is a perfect example of that. And I'm not saying that sometimes we have to, some schools are just going fully remote learning, fully online learning, and that's a reality, and that's fine. But at least ensure that you're receiving the resources and the guidance that you need to have to continue that learning happening at home, and not simply babysitting through a computer and your children falling more and more behind in their education. Ensure that you are giving them the education that they need, but that you're not alone in that. The primary responsibility for that enterprise is the school in your community, and they should be partners with you in that. Now, if your school is doing it the other way, if they're doing some sort of hybrid learning process or even in-person learning model, then even more. Ensure that actually learning and social emotional development is happening, because children need that right now in this moment. But also ensure that they're being kept safe, that things are not being done in an irresponsible manner. Because politically, a lot of people just want to throw your kids into the bunch, and it's a free-for-all kind of game without really taking this pandemic seriously. So if your children are actually going to school, you do what you need to do at home to keep them safe, but demand that the schools and the districts are also doing their part to keep them safe and learning as well. So whether it's online or in person, you have to have that sense of responsibility to ensure that you are advocating for your child, both for their safety and their learning.
Great. Thank you so much, Wilmer, for this amazing conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. And if you want to put a face to the voices you just heard, you can follow us on Instagram at LatinxCan. If you have questions or feedback for us, you can email us at latinxcan@gmail.com. And if you like this episode, please leave a review. It is the quickest way to grow as a community. Once again, thank you for listening, and remember, unidos somos más.